Okay, terrific. Thanks, Marty. Appreciate it very much. So can you all see my screen?
Yes, we see it great.
Okay, perfect. So again, thanks, Marty, for letting me present. Yes, we have presented all over the place, you and I. And John Marino, I think, is in the audience. So I just want to give a shout out to John, make sure everyone knows that he and I work together at Policy and Taxation Group. All right. So let's get started. I have a lot of slides, but as Marty knows, that's typical for me. But please jump in anytime and ask me any questions you'd like to ask. I'll pause kind of halfway through to make sure that you're getting what you need. And if you have any questions, you can ask. But as you can see from the screen, I'm going to be talking to you about protecting your wealth and your family business in this very volatile tax and political environment we're in today. Policy and Taxation Group is an organization that is the voice of family offices and financially successful individuals in Washington, D.C. We focus exclusively on tax and economic policy that affects them. I also represent Family Enterprise USA, which is an organization of family businesses. We advocate for generationally owned family businesses and their lifetime of savings. And I'm going to share some of the information from Family Enterprise USA with you today so you understand the importance of family businesses in the United States and in our economy. So with that, you may not know that there are 83 million jobs generated by family businesses in America, and $7.7 trillion is what they contribute to our GDP. 54% of the GDP in this country is from family-owned businesses, and 59% of the workforce. So they are important. They haven't been listened to very well. And that's why Family Enterprise USA exists today, to be their voice. Every year, Family Enterprise USA is known for its annual survey. This is a little dated. We're in the field right now with 2024. We've been in the field for a little over a month. We already have 550 respondents. Last year, we had 571. And I'm just going to share a few of those results with you because I think it's important that you understand the impact of family businesses on the economy. So 42 states, as I mentioned, 571 respondents. The top tax issue for family businesses continues to be income tax. And we know why that is because we've learned that 80% of family businesses operate as a pass-through entity. So they're paying 37% plus in income taxes, whereas corporate America, the C Corps get to pay 21%. The second issue that's important then in terms of tax policy is the estate tax. Estate tax has always been important. As everyone knows, individuals, families pay estate tax. Corporations don't pay an estate tax. As I just mentioned, 80% of family businesses operate as a pass-through. This statistic was never known until we did this survey. We didn't know either. And it's very, very important, which is why 199A legislation, pass-through entity legislation, is so important to our family business owners. Another question we didn't ever ask before, we've now learned that 72% of family businesses have generations of employees working in their business. So it's really, really a generational business, not just for the family, but for the employees. And oh, by the way, for the community as well. 46% of them treat their employees really well. They pay above average in terms of wages and benefits as opposed to non-family businesses. And 82% give locally to a local organization or a national organization with a local chapter. That's why, as I just said, when the family business has to be sold to pay the estate tax or for whatever reason, that community loses all of that giving. That's so very, very important. So to make sure that members of Congress understand what family businesses are and what they aren't, we got them to form a Congressional Family Business Caucus. We're very proud of this caucus. It's an educational caucus. It's bipartisan. Its really purpose is to educate members of Congress, voters, media, what family businesses are and what they aren't. And oh, by the way, they are all sizes of business. They're not small businesses, they're medium sized and they're large. Whenever we say family businesses to members of Congress, a lot of times they just say, oh, you mean small business? And I correct them over and over again because we know that there are small businesses, but there are large and medium-sized businesses as well. The co-chairs of the caucus, as you can see on the screen, We have 4 members of that are co-chairs, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats. We have a Democrat and a Republican from Texas. And then we have Claudia Tenney, Republican from New York, and Brad Schneider, Democrat from Illinois. We're working on the Senate caucus. Susan Collins has agreed, and we're working on a Democrat co-chair right now. There are currently 39 members, as you can see on this list. There are about half of them are Democrats and half of them are Republicans. We're pretty proud of this. This has been going on for the last maybe 18 months, which is not a very long period of time to gain this kind of support. And we believe it's because it is bipartisan, it is educational, and they really, really understand how important family businesses are to this country. So before I get into, I'm going to talk about tax policy, legislative policy. Obviously, politics plays into this somewhat. I just ask, are there any questions or comments anybody'd like to make before I move on to this?
Real quick question, 1 second.
Could you break down from a tax standpoint, those companies that are family businesses that pay the 31% and those that are in somewhat a quasi-cash business that don't come anywhere near that because they're getting a lot of money in cash and don't report it?
No, we don't have that.
Not
We don't
sure
have
yet.
that statistic.
Thanks, great, yeah, perfect.
But we do have, as I mentioned, first of all, 87% of the businesses in America are family-owned businesses. And as I mentioned, 80% of them are pass-through entities. So they are paying that 37% plus. That's just at a federal level. And if you're like me in California, you're paying a lot more, or you all in New York. So whereas corporate America gets to pay that 21%, and that's 20% of the businesses that are in this country. So any other questions on family businesses or the
Do you
statistics?
include real estate holding companies and real estate operators in this as well?
Yes, we do. If it's a family-owned real estate holding company, and we have quite a few of those, we have someone on our board that actually fits that profile. We do include them, and they're very, very important, as you all know, in the statistics.
Yep, keep on going.
Okay, so let's talk about tax policy. 2024, you may think is not going to be an important year because we all know it's elections and everyone's going to be focused on that. Well, it's going to be a critical year because we're setting it up for 2025. And many of you know that the exemption, all of the TCJA Act provisions are going to expire in 2025, the tax provisions. So we're very concerned about that. So let's talk about 5 different areas. Landscape today is around the budget challenges and the new House leadership. Congress is really warming to these revenue raisers to offset tax cuts. And this is from both sides of the aisle. Democrats continue to investigate successful entrepreneurs, and I'm going to give you examples of that. And we have great concern about that. Treasury, we have to remind people this all the time. They can change the laws in this country through regulation. They do not need Congress to do that. They've done it in the past, and we're concerned about it doing it in the future. And I mentioned about the tax provisions expiring in TCJA. So we have this federal deficit. As you can see where the budget is today, this is probably not a surprise to any of you. We're at $2 trillion and growing. And the preliminary results I just got this morning from our 2024 survey with Family Enterprise USA, it is now the family business's #1 concern in the country. They understand what debt does to this country because they understand what it does to their own businesses. We all know Mike Johnson has his challenges as this new speaker. He's trying to deal with the far right. Just today, he said that he will not take up the bill that was just passed in the House passed in the Senate early this morning. There are ways around that, but it's a really, really difficult task. And so, he's doing his best to be the speaker, but he's had certainly as his challenges, you all know. So I mentioned that Congress is warming to these revenue raisers and these tax offsets. Again, this is both sides of the aisle. So people tend to believe that Republicans will not raise taxes. The fact is they have raised taxes in the past, and it's all about the end of the day, the deal that's cut. So Jason Smith, many of you know, is the chairman of Ways and Means, and Jason Smith does support families. He does support farmers. And he supports small businesses. We continue to educate him on the fact that there are more than just small businesses in America. There are family businesses that are small, medium, and large. And we think he's getting it. Two of his provisions, as you can see here on the screen, are the R&D expensing and the business interest deduction are in this tax bill, which I'll talk about in a second. Ron Wyden continues to want childcare credit extensions, low income support, and he really wants to tax successful individuals. So the tax bill that just passed in the House, that's sitting at the Senate, that may or may not be taken up in the Senate, does, as I mentioned, it restores bonus depreciation, which is very important. It restores the deductibility of business interest and this R&D expensing, which is so important to many of our businesses. Currently, it has to be capitalized over a 5-year period of time, and it's rolling back to being expensed. And so that is the hope. If this bill passes, it is included, and that's what will happen. Child care credit, the increase in the refundable pre-child credit for low-income earners, and then the child care credit is also indexed to inflation. I mean, there's lots of provisions in this bill. I'm just going through a few of them that might be interesting to you. Another one is that there is now a requirement for 1099-As only if you make more than $1,000 or you pay more than $1,000 to a contractor. It used to be $600. Increase in low-income housing tax credit and the Taiwan relief from the double tax that they currently are paying. So let me just stop there and ask again, any comments or questions from anyone in the room or online?
Any questions? Okay, keep on going.
Okay,
What,
so I
you-
mentioned that the,
I'm sorry, Pat.
go
I
ahead,
know
Marty.
God divided, political system. Odds are it may continue to be divided past November. So, these House things are for not, it seems like the executive arm has a lot of power in their administrative regulation, right? Pat?
Right, I'm having a little hard time hearing you, but I think that you're talking about, with the divided government, which I'm going to talk about in a second, what's likely. And yes, our Treasury has a lot more power than people really realize.
Okay, perfect.
So let's talk about what specifically we mean when we talk about successful entrepreneurs being investigated. The fact is, and maybe some of you experienced this, subpoenas have gone out to wealthy individuals. They obviously have their tax return, but subpoenas for their estate planning documents, for their life insurance policies, because they really are investigating people that make over $400,000 a year. This is not a political statement. We are a bipartisan organization. We always have, we always will be. I'm just telling you what the Democrat Party is doing right now, because they believe that's where they can get the revenue. So to that light, very specifically, this is what happened in November of last year. The Senate had two committees, the Senate Finance Committee and the Budget Committee, both of which held hearings on taxation of successful individuals. Look at the titles of these hearings: Fairness and Fiscal Responsibility, Cracking Down on Wealthy Tax Cheats. And the second is Examining How the Tax Code Affects High-Income Individuals and Tax Planning Strategies. So they're serious. They're very serious about this. And they have taken major steps in investigating, as I mentioned, anyone that makes over $400,000 a year. Senator Wyden has advocated this billionaire's tax for a very long time. It's complicated, but at the end of the day, what he wants to do is he really wants to tax the unrealized gains of assets, and not just liquid assets. This could cover family businesses, real estate, non-liquid assets. And think about what would really transpire here. A family business would have to have their assets valued or their business valued. Let's say if your real estate, as example, valued every single year, and you'd be paying a tax on the unrealized gain year after year of that asset. Now, it's not quite that simple, and there are some exemptions, but this tax would be pretty disastrous for family business owners because, as most of you know, the value of the business isn't necessarily what they have actually in liquidity to pay in any kind of tax. So it's very concerning. But as I mentioned, the regulatory environment is changing. The Treasury can change regulations. They've done it in the past. I will tell you that we met recently with the Treasury and asked them about specifically valuation discounts for family businesses. And we got the information that they are not going to attempt to eliminate them again, that they learned their lesson almost 10 years ago when they tried and they had a hearing. We were at that hearing. We brought a lot of family business owners to the hearing. And the pushback was so extensive that they determined that they really are not going to eliminate valuation discounts for family related entities, which is very good news. But they have a lot of other things they'd like to do. And particularly the senators here on the screen, again, really want to tax successful entrepreneurs. They want the Treasury to look at a lot of these gift and estate planning laws. They want them to look at trusts. At one point, certainly in the Build Back Better Act, they wanted to eliminate grantor trusts. They believe there are abuses and they want those abuses to be investigated. And Secretary Yellen has said, I'm going to audit people that make over $400,000. I'm not auditing people that make less than $400,000. And in depending on where you live, $400,000 is really not that much of income. And now you all know with the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed, she actually has the funding to make this happen. And just last week, February 5th, the IRS commissioner said that he has actually recovered $520 million by concentrating on taxpayers that make more than $1 million in income and with more than $250,000 in recognized tax debt. So it is happening and they are collecting revenue. So let's go ahead. Does somebody have a question?
No, this is great data. Fantastic. Keep on going.
Okay, so let's talk about 2025. Many of you know in the TCJA, there are provisions that are going to expire at the end of 2025. We're concerned about almost all of these. They are very substantial. The income tax rates are going to roll back to 39%. The itemized deduction is going to be restored. The increase in the child care credit is going to expire. For us that live in these SALT states, it's not a bad idea that the limitation is going to go away. But most people that like the income would like that to stay in place. And the estate tax exemption that you all know is currently at $13 million per person, double per couple, is going to revert back to $5 million. And that's a major concern. In addition, the 20% deduction through 199A for family businesses that meet that description is going to go away. It's going to expire. I already mentioned R&D expensing. It's going to be spread again over 5 years, which is devastating to manufacturers. Narrowing of the interest deduction limitations, and then ending of the bonus depreciation. So all of those are things that can happen. And while a lot of people think that, tax policy moves slowly, I will tell you in the 25 plus years that I've worked in Washington, D.C. on these issues, it moves slowly until it moves fast. And it moves fast usually at the end of the year, sometimes at the end of a session. So be prepared for December, because I think a lot will happen. And if you don't lay the groundwork ahead of time, you're not going to like the outcome. So
Yeah,
this
10 minutes,
is
Pat.
what could happen if there is a Republican sweep. I don't think any of this is a surprise. Obviously, they would extend all the TCJA provisions, the ones I just talked about. They would repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. They would scale back all that IRS enforcement and collect back that money. They would eliminate the corporate alternative minimum tax, and they would lower the corporate tax rate itself, that 21%. If there is a divided government, which is probably most likely, they're going to extend the middle class tax cuts that were in TCJA. There's going to be reduction in the tax incentives for foreign derived income, promote domestic research and manufacturing, and find some large revenue raisers on some unsympathetic groups. Well, we know what that is: wealthy individuals and entrepreneurs. But at the end of the day, if there is divided government, there won't be much done, unfortunately. If the Democrats take a sweep, What will happen is there will be an increase in the child care tax credit, remove the SALT cap. They'll increase taxes on corporations. They will extend some of the energy tax credits. They will allow all of the TCJA tax cuts to expire, and they will impose or attempt to try to impose the tax on unrealized appreciation or taxes on successful individuals. So in the last two slides I have just revolve around to remind you that these things were all included in the Build Back Better Act, which ultimately became the Inflation Reduction Act. That I'm not going to go through all of these, but all of these things can be revisited again and probably will be. They've been in the Green Book of the Presidents every year. So expect discussion to be held around all of these issues, in addition to all of these issues as well. And I just remind you that the surtax that was in the Build Back Better Act on people that make over $10 million, the threshold on that was only $200,000 if your income is in a trust. And then the additional surtax of 3% was only $500,000 in terms of the threshold. Again, if your family business or your assets were in a trust. So very concerning. We were the only organization talking about those thresholds for trusts, because most organizations don't focus on trust. And I will say that the way that we are different from trade associations, even though we work with all of them, is that we represent the issues of the families of family businesses, successful individuals, and family offices. So we don't work on the business issues, we work on the families' issues themselves, again, of those successful individuals, family offices, and family businesses. So with that, I would just like to thank you. And Marty, I think we have some time, so maybe there are some questions, I hope.
You have any questions in the audience about the existing tax regime? And enforcement and regulatory? Actually, Pat, there was I guess it's been a book written about, I'm not sure if it was a Supreme Court hearing or ruling back in 1980s that talked about the ability of executive branch to interpret laws and to be able to, and that's the creation of the birth of this huge regulatory state that we have in the United States. And so I find the whole subject matter fascinating, that whenever we switch to the executive branch, a whole new set of rules happen rather than just having things dictated from Congress, right? So I guess that my question is, can you talk about some of the families that you deal with? 'Cause I know that, you were instrumental in working on the repeal of the death tax, right? Or a lot of it, right? So maybe you can talk about the context of that, and then about how you've come to this latest task.
Yeah, exactly. So Marty knows I formed Policy and Taxation Group in 1995, and I see there's a question in the chat. I'll address that first. Who's asking for some information on our, and I see John Marino walking past the front of the room. Please contact John. He can give you his business card. That's the contact information that was on the screen. So he's there. He can give you any information you'd like to have about us, about both organizations. So, and John works for Policy and Taxation Group. As I was saying, I founded in 1995 because I firsthand learned what the estate tax did to families from the death of family members in the family office that I created and later sold to GenSpring. And it was horrific. And nobody in DC was talking about it. Nobody in DC really understood. And quite frankly, it was almost more than the economic impact on the family. It was the emotional impact on the family and what the IRS did to this family and then later families as I experienced it. So I started going to DC. I started talking about how destructive the estate tax was and how unbeneficial it really was to this country and the economy. And people listened. And it's a long history. I'm not going to go into all that history. So that's part of the reason that we are today, which is we have a $13 million exemption. When I started working on it, we had a $650,000 exemption and we had a 55% rate. And now we have a 40% rate. But Marty, we've learned that the issues are so much bigger today. The attacks are so much bigger. And so we really have expanded our mission, and we now focus on all tax and economic issues that wealthy families, successful individuals, and family offices face in this country. And the reason that we use successful individuals, as Marty knows, we've done a lot of work with Frank Luntz through the years. Frank and I have become good friends after 25 years of working together. And the voters understand and like the term successful individuals. They don't like the term wealthy. In fact, 70% of Americans would like to see a wealth tax, which I didn't even talk about. There really is a movement in this country for a wealth tax, and the voters support it, not knowing really what that means or who pays it or who pays any of the tax in this country. It is really, really scary. So that's who we are with Policy and Taxation Group, and as Marty mentioned, and that is our focus today.
And is there a foundation? Do people make donations? How do they do that?
Yeah, great question. So Policy and Taxation Group, and thank you for that, Marty, is a 501c4. So we can accept from family offices, successful individuals, donations. And you can go on our website. You can do it on our website. You can see John. Family Enterprise USA is a 501c3. So we are an advocacy organization. We're a not-for-profit charitable organization. And again, it has its website, and our support comes from sponsors as well as membership.
Fantastic, Pat. Well, listen, great to see you again, and we're going to be in California in May and June, so hopefully we'll see you there too.
All right. Love to do that, Marty. Thanks again.
Great
Appreciate
job.
being
Thanks so
on.
much.